Hello and welcome to another episode of Writing Thoughts. Today I'm going to be talking about the guards and protagonists in stories. As always, if you want to read this blog post, you can find it on my website, thepensleuth.com. There's a link to that in the description below. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. With that said, let's begin. One of the most important connections to establish in your novel is between the story and the reader. Many writers do this by creating a relatable, impactful story. Everyone can understand a romance or day-to-day problem, which makes it so easy for a reader to empathize with the characters and their position in the novel. This connection is strained when you have an unrealistic world. That's when a guard comes in. So here's the topic. The best connection a writer can create is between the protagonist and the reader. If the reader enjoys reading the protagonist, a lot of the story becomes smooth sailing. The reader can sympathize with the actions of the protagonist and they can have a greater impression. Yet that is a difficult connection to establish when you have a unique character. Only some readers will form this connection. I believe this is why so many authors create simple characters with mild personalities. Personalities that are easy to agree with and difficult to disagree with. The character will be less impactful, but you stand a greater chance of gaining reader interest. That is why the guard character is so important. It is a character that is learning with the reader, a character that asks questions, forms opinions, and makes decisions based on the answers they receive. In essence, they are characters that take the bullet in terms of having exposition dumped on them for the reader's sake. Sometimes the guard and the protagonist are the same person, but more often than not, it is another character. So here's my take on the topic. I believe that using a guard character in a novel is not only a great way to have the reader's questions answered, but it is fundamentally necessary when explaining a fictional world space to the reader. A high fantasy world, a futuristic science fiction one, or any other type of abnormal world, will need a character that makes sense of the world for the reader's sake. It is easier for a writer to keep track of all the elements in their story as they understand what is important to the story, and what are superficial details that only add to the immersion. Yet a reader doesn't have this luxury, which is why the writer creates a guard character. This way, the writer can slyly explain to the reader, through this curious character, what is so important in the world and what matters in the plot. Simply put, the guard character acts as a vessel for the reader to place themselves in whenever the story's complexity ranks up a level. Of course, this isn't the only method a writer can use. Some writers prefer to use simple narration in their novels, explaining the curious objects, machines, and concepts to the reader as the story goes on through their narration. Yet that conveys a different feeling than novels where questions are asked about the world space, where characters are learning as they go. When every character understands what is going on, the reader is the only one that needs to catch up, and sometimes the story gets away from them. Having a character that slows things down so they can get a grip on what has happened can change this feeling. The world seems more open and wondrous. It's easier to understand. Some writers also use a combination of the two, but that depends on the novel. Some concepts are too simple for the character to give any attention, so that is explained through narration. It's only the crucial plot points that have a guard character asking questions about important elements in the story. So here are my thoughts. I've always enjoyed writing guard characters. It comes down to me to explain the story in the words of another character and have another character respond with the appropriate personality. The conversations can easily come off as natural, and it's another excuse to create some character development. Yet I'm also aware that such a character can turn into an annoyance. There are certainly stories out there where it feels like the writer is holding the reader's hand, and depending on the intensity of the story and scene, it can destroy the atmosphere, the feeling that is created. Nobody wants to explore a wonderful new place and have every poignant moment broken with exposition. At the same time, no reader wants to go through a new and wonderful place without understanding the importance, the significance of it, and thus they miss out on a greater opportunity to admire the world space. With that said, if a writer can keep the guard character from breaking the story with exposition dumps, and make them an important part of the story, this is a writing method I find very effective. It's also one that I like to play with in order to make it more interesting to the reader. Sometimes the guide characters are different in certain scenes. Sometimes these moments can turn into impactful scenes where a character voices their opinion or is moved by the answer they receive. But that's just my thoughts on the topic. I'd like to hear from you. Do you believe guide characters are a useful storytelling tool, or do you believe there is a better method for presenting new elements in a fictional world? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this episode of Writing Thoughts, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you in the next episode. And as always, good day, good night, and happy writing.